Why do some of the toughest fighters in the world, men who step into a cage and battle for survival, willingly hand over their championship belts to a man who isn't even an athlete? Why do champions like Khamzat Chimaev, Islam Makhachev, and even the legendary Khabib Nurmagomedov rush to pose for pictures, laugh at his jokes, and call him their brother? The man I'm talking about is Ramzan Kadyrov, the powerful and feared leader of Chechnya. To the outside world, it looks like these fighters are simply paying respect, maybe even enjoying themselves. But behind the smiles, there's a darker truth, because with Kadyrov, nothing is ever just a friendly photo op. When Chimaev won the UFC championship, his very first move wasn't a celebration with his team. It wasn't a return home to Sweden where he once trained.
No.
His first stop was Chechnya. He handed the belt to Kadyrov himself, publicly thanking him and admitting that at one point he didn't believe in himself until Kadyrov told him he would be a champion. Islam Makhachev did the same after his title win. Even Khabib, widely admired as one of the greatest fighters of all time, has been spotted time and time again alongside the Chechen leader, laughing and dining with him. On the surface, it looks like harmless camaraderie, champions sharing their success with a local leader, but the real question is, why him? What is the secret behind Kadyrov's influence? Why do fighters line up to praise him, to call him a mentor and friend? And more importantly, what happens to those who don't? The answers lie in a terrifying story, one that stretches from bloody wars to political assassinations, from family betrayals to international scandals. And once you hear it, you'll never look at those smiling photos the same way again. To understand who Ramzan Kadyrov really is, you have to go back to the beginning. His rise to power wasn't the story of a man who earned respect or admiration through leadership. It was built on blood, betrayal, and ruthless ambition. It all started with his father, Ramzan Kadyrov. In the early 2000s, Chechnya was still reeling from years of brutal wars against Russia. Moscow wanted someone loyal in charge of the republic, someone who would crush separatists and keep the region under control. That person became Ahmad. Backed heavily by Vladimir Putin himself, Ahmad was made president of Chechnya in 2003. To the Kremlin, he was a perfect fit, obedient, pragmatic, willing to keep Moscow's interests above all else. At first, it looked like the alliance would last, but soon, cracks began to show. Ahmad started complaining publicly that his authority was being undermined by Russian officials. He gave speeches about how unclear his powers were, about how his relationship with the Kremlin was reaching a dead end. To criticize Moscow so openly was dangerous. And in 2004, he paid the ultimate price. During a Victory Day celebration at a stadium, a bomb exploded directly under Ahmad's seat. The blast killed him instantly, along with several others. The official investigation pointed fingers at militants opposed to his rule. But years later, disturbing questions emerged. How did anyone even know he would be at the stadium? The trip wasn't scheduled. It was decided at the last moment. Only a tiny circle of insiders could have known. Even stranger, Ramzan Kadyrov, who was supposed to be head of his father's security detail and the man responsible for protecting him, was nowhere near the stadium that day. Instead, he was in Moscow, and the very next day after the assassination, he was seen meeting with Putin behind closed doors. Off camera, it was rumored that Putin promised Ramzan something extraordinary: Moscow's full support as long as he stayed loyal. For many in Russia today, the theory is obvious. Ramzan himself may have played a role in the death of his father, because the moment Ahmad died, Ramzan's path to power opened wide. But Ahmad's death wasn't the only convenient disappearance in the family. Ramzan had an older brother, Zilim Khan. He was infamous not for leadership, but for drunken rampages and even public gunfights. He embarrassed the family name, and just weeks after Ahmad's assassination, Zilim Khan also died under mysterious circumstances. No real investigation, no clear answers, just another roadblock cleared for Ramzan. By 2007, at only 30 years old, Ramzan Kadyrov became the president of Chechnya. There were no strong rivals, because they weren't allowed to run. Moscow poured money into his campaign and his PR, making him untouchable. He wasn't chosen by the people, he was installed by fear, money, and Moscow's blessing. And from the very beginning, he showed exactly what kind of ruler he would be: ruthless, unforgiving, and willing to crush anyone, even family, if it meant holding on to power. From his early days in office, one thing became clear: loyalty to Kadyrov was everything. But loyalty didn't mean friendship, it meant survival. Take the story of Magomed Azrailov, one of Ramzan's closest allies. Strong, talented, and highly respected, Magomed was once seen as Ramzan's right-hand man. But then, rumors started circulating, whispers that Magomed might be ambitious, that he might one day want to seize power for himself. For most leaders, this would mean a falling out, maybe exile, maybe prison, but with Kadyrov, betrayal wasn't punished with politics, it was punished with terror. For years, Chechens have told a chilling story that Magomed was fed to Kadyrov's lions. Yes, lions. Like many dictators, Ramzan owned a private zoo filled with exotic animals, and the rumor is that Magomed's disappearance was no accident, that his end came in the most brutal way imaginable. The story is so widely known in Chechnya that it doesn't even matter whether it's literally true. What matters is the fear it created. The message was unmistakable: betray Kadyrov, and you don't just lose your life, you lose it in a way that makes others tremble. That fear spreads far beyond Chechnya. Look closely at the eyes of fighters like Khamzat Chimaev when they stand next to Kadyrov. You'll see the tension, the unease, because they know what kind of man he is. They know what happens when someone refuses him. One wrong move, one sign of disobedience, and the consequences could be devastating. So when UFC champions hand over their belts and shower him with gratitude, is it really respect or is it survival? Kadyrov's power wasn't just built through politics and fear, it also extended into his personal life, a twisted empire of wives, children, and secrets. Officially, the media only talks about one wife, Makhachev Kadyrova, the woman said to be the mother of his 12 children. But the truth is much darker. Ramzan has multiple wives and concubines, with children scattered across them. To the outside world, he presents the family as if all the children come from Medni. Behind closed doors, it's different. One of his other wives, Fatima Kazuieva, was crowned runner-up in a beauty contest in 2006. The twist? That contest was allegedly organized just for Kadyrov, a private event where he could pick new girls for his harem. Fatima went on to have 3 of his children. She lives in luxury, hidden away from the public eye. But not all of his wives lived in quiet wealth. In 2003, another wife, Janeta Mukieva, was shot dead in broad daylight. Opposition outlets claimed it happened because she disobeyed him. In a grotesque act of mockery, Kadyrov renamed one of his gas stations after her for a single day, as if her death was nothing more than a dark joke. This twisted sense of control extended to his children as well. Among them, one stands above all: Adam Kadyrov, Ramzan's favorite son and his hand-picked successor. Adam is treated like royalty. Ramzan buys him watches worth millions of dollars and parades him at private meetings with Vladimir Putin. He is groomed not just as a political heir, but as a symbol of power. Ramzan always wanted Adam to be strong, a fighter, someone the world would respect, so he surrounded the boy with the best athletes, trainers, and bodyguards. That's where the story takes an even darker turn. 2 men became especially close to Adam: Abdulkarim Adilov, a talented Chechen fighter, and Murat Agmarzo, a skilled marksman and former special forces instructor. Abdulkarim often trained with Adam, cornered him in boxing matches, and was trusted with his development. Murat acted as his personal protector, ensuring nothing could harm the heir of Chechnya. Then suddenly, in 2022, both men were dead. The official explanations? Wild, contradictory, and suspicious. Some outlets whispered that they had looked the other way while Adam experimented with drugs and that in a reckless moment, Adam ran over innocent people with his car. Others suggested they were killed because rumors spread that they were homosexual, which Kadyrov saw as an unforgivable stain on the family's name. What really happened may never be known, but what matters is this: 2 highly respected men, both tied closely to Kadyrov's son, died within weeks of each other. Their deaths weren't covered in Chechen media, they weren't mentioned in government meetings, they were erased. And that erasure wasn't just about them. It was a warning, a signal to anyone around the family, even those trusted with protecting the heir, that loyalty is never enough, that no one is safe. Now put yourself in Khamzat Chimaev's shoes. In that same year, he first met Ramzan Kadyrov. They trained together in the same gym where Abdulkarim had once trained Adam. Chimaev wasn't just expected to fight, he was expected to play a role. He was asked to spar with Kadyrov's sons, to theatrically fall when they hit him, to declare that the boys were skilled fighters. And after watching what happened to Abdulkarim and Murat, what choice did he have? Defy Kadyrov and risk ending up the same way? Or play along, smile for the cameras, and survive? For Chimaev and for every other fighter in those photos, the answer is obvious. If Kadyrov's cruelty ended at Chechnya's borders, perhaps fighters could avoid him, but his influence stretches far beyond. Take the assassination of Boris Nemtsov, one of Putin's most vocal critics and a former deputy prime minister. Nemtsov was charismatic, ambitious, and openly preparing to run against Putin in future elections. He was a real threat. On the night of February 27, 2015, Nemtsov was shot 4 times in the back while crossing a bridge just steps from the Kremlin. The symbolism was clear. Even in the heart of Moscow, no one was safe. When the killers were caught, all roads led back to Chechnya. The gunman, Zardadiev, was a deputy commander in a Chechen battalion under Kadyrov's interior ministry. 4 other assassins were also ethnic Chechens tied to his network. Another suspect, Ramzan Kadyrov, a close relative of one of Kadyrov's allies, was never even questioned, despite appearing in surveillance footage. Protected, untouchable. For many Russians, the conclusion was obvious. The hit was carried out by Kadyrov's men, possibly on Putin's direct orders. And once again, Kadyrov proved his value to the Kremlin, the man who handled the jobs others wouldn't touch. But Nemtsov wasn't the only one. In 2008, Ruslan Yamadeyev, part of a rival Chechen clan, was gunned down in Moscow. His brother Solim, commander of a battalion loyal not to Kadyrov but to the Russian military, was assassinated in Dubai. The details of that murder read like a spy thriller. Russian officials arriving with diplomatic pouches that couldn't be searched, smuggling in weapons, including a golden pistol. That very pistol was used to kill Solim. The assassin was caught, but his handler, a close ally of Kadyrov, walked away untouched and continued his political career. Even those who fled to Europe weren't safe. Umar Ezrailov, a former bodyguard of Kadyrov who dared to file a complaint against him in the European Court of Human Rights, was gunned down in Vienna in 2009. The message couldn't be clearer. Kadyrov's reach is international. His men can find you in Moscow, in Dubai, in Vienna. Borders don't matter. Law doesn't matter. Loyalty to him is the only thing that matters. Now imagine being a fighter caught in that web. It's not just about money or friendship anymore, it's about survival. Because when Kadyrov invites you, what does saying no really mean? By now, the pattern is clear. Ramzan Kadyrov is not just a political leader, he is a man whose influence is built on fear, blood, and untouchable power. So when fighters like Khamzat Chimaev, Islam Makhachev, or Khabib Nurmagomedov stand beside him, it isn't just a gesture of respect, it's survival. On the surface, it might look like Chimaev has options. After all, he has Swedish citizenship. He even gained a passport in the United Arab Emirates. With that kind of global freedom, why would he risk returning to Chechnya and bowing to Kadyrov? The answer lies in the bloody history of Chechnya itself. For decades, Kadyrov has clashed with the Yamadeyev family, another powerful clan that once held major influence in Moscow and even commanded their own battalion. The Yamadeyev brothers dared to challenge Kadyrov, and one by one they were killed. Ruslan in Moscow, Salim in Dubai, Jabrail in Chechnya. Their army dismantled, their family erased from power. That's what happens to rivals in Chechnya. There is no neutral ground. No way to quietly step aside. If Kadyrov views you as a threat or even a potential embarrassment, you're finished. Chimaev knows this. Fighters know this. Accepting Kadyrov's friendship isn't a choice, it's a shield. A way to stay alive, to protect their families, to avoid becoming the next Abdul Karim or Murat, erased from history without a trace. So, when you see Chimaev letting Kadyrov's sons punch him while he theatrically falls to the ground, understand what's really happening. This isn't a fun sparring session, it's theater, it's survival. Because in Chechnya, even champions have no way out. But here's the question many outsiders ask. Why does Moscow let this continue? Why does Putin allow Kadyrov to operate like an untouchable king within Russia? The answer is brutally simple. Kadyrov is useful. After 2 devastating wars, Chechnya was a powder keg. Separatist groups were strong, militant activity was high, and Moscow risked losing control of the region entirely. Putin needed someone ruthless enough to crush resistance, someone who would rule with an iron fist no matter the cost. Ramzan Kadyrov became that man. Since taking power, he has eliminated separatist groups, silenced opposition, and kept Chechnya firmly under Moscow's control. For Putin, that's worth everything, and in return, he gives Kadyrov what no other regional leader in Russia has: total freedom. Political assassinations? Overlooked. Human rights abuses? Ignored. International scandals? Dismissed as lies. As long as Kadyrov remains loyal, he is untouchable. Even worse, Kadyrov often acts as Putin's executioner when someone needs to disappear, when a critic becomes too loud, when dirty work needs to be done. Kadyrov's men handle it. That was the story with Boris Nemtsov. That was the story with ex-bodyguards silenced abroad. For Putin, it's a perfect arrangement. For everyone else, it's a nightmare, because if Kadyrov is shielded by the Kremlin itself, then who can stop him? Now look again at those smiling photos. Khamzat Chimaev holding his belt beside Ramzan Kadyrov, Islam Makhachev shaking his hand, Khabib laughing at his jokes. To the untrained eye, it looks like brotherhood, friendship, celebration. But behind the smiles is something else. Fear, a survival instinct, a recognition that when Kadyrov calls, you don't refuse. Not if you value your life. Not if you want your family to remain safe. Because the truth is this, there is no escaping Ramzan Kadyrov, not in Chechnya, not in Russia, not even in Europe or the Middle East. His reach is global, his methods brutal, his protection from Moscow absolute. So what does that mean for fighters like Chimaev? It means their loyalty isn't really loyalty at all, it's theater, it's submission, it's survival. And that raises the final chilling question. If even global superstars, men who can crush opponents inside a cage, have no choice but to bow to Kadyrov, then who on earth could possibly resist him? If you were in their place, staring down the power of a dictator with blood on his hands, knowing that one wrong move could cost you everything, what would you do? Would you risk your life, or would you smile, hand over the belt, and play the role expected of you? Because in Kadyrov's world, there are only two choices: obedience or destruction.